there seems to be a very clear theme of like the U.S. wants dudes who can win. And, Scotty Scheffler talked at length about that about a month ago. I want guys who have gone up and won in competitions. And when you look at it, okay, Brooks Koepka's a captain's pick. He's live. He comes with all this baggage, but it's just a no-brainer. You want a winner. Sam Burns, questionable form, but he's a guy who won the match play, which is this format in a way. Justin Thomas, a guy not in form. You want the guy who you just know can win in this setting. And I feel like when you look at, and Colin Morikawa, two-time major champions. So much of this team, when I think of the U.S., is like trying to make sure you just have guys who are ready for this test, guys who aren't going to be just the best golfers, but the guys who aren't going to be scared of this test. And that comes with questions because, like you said, the European team, it on paper does not look as good, but all of the top players have gone up a level. Rory McIlroy 2 years ago was, still kind of in that downturn of his career. Now he's in the two best 2 year stretch technically of his career. Hovland went from a young, nice player to a superstar. John Rahm went up a level, won a Masters. Matt Fitzpatrick won a major. So I do feel like the European team is much shrinking that margin than we thought, 2 years ago. But at the same time, I do think this is a U.S. team made up of guys that are ready for this, for lack of a better term.
What say you, Hugh?
Yeah, I always go back to, if you look at what has gone wrong for the United States so much over the last 3 decades, it is making decisions within a vacuum. Getting caught in the moment, feeling like, hey, we have to take the hot guy. There are a lot of Ryder Cup cycles where Lucas Glover is on this American team because he won 2 events that are now a month ago. Ryan Moore getting picked stands out as that sort of thing. And not to pick on Ryan Moore, because there's guys just through the years that have just been recency bias. And it feels like Zach Johnson, this captain, has decided to pick the guys. In some ways, he is modeling his team selection after the way that the Europeans have picked this team for decades. Lee Westwood once famously said that going forward, the European team was going to be the automatic selections, the captain's pick, and Poltz. Speaking of Ian Poulter, because it just, no matter how good he was playing, just pick Ian Poulter and he'll figure it out that week. Well, I think CJ definitely did that. It was the automatic selections, the captain's picks, and JT.
Yep.
Like there's no other reason for Justin Thomas to be on this team other than the fact that Justin Thomas is the closest approximation to Ian Poulter that the Americans have come up with in quite some time, maybe ever. And so there's always going to be change in these Ryder Cup cycles. We never think that a guy is just going to disappear in 2 years, but if you go back and look at the rosters, it always happens. There's always rookies. There's always guys that emerge you don't see coming 2 years away. The Europeans, I think 2 years ago, were stuck in a moment where some of the older guys were past their prime, and some of the younger guys, to Brody's point, were not quite ready yet. A Hovland, a Fitzpatrick, Fleetwood wasn't, in great form and did play well that week. So, but those guys have all ascended a level, and at the same time, you have the Americans choosing a lot of guys that are just dudes and like just trusting that they're going to figure it out when it matters. So it's a fascinating cycle in that regard.
And Scotty Scheffler 2 years ago, I'm sorry to cut you off, but Scotty Scheffler 2 years ago is the example of that slight shift, right? He hadn't won anything. He was still kind of this fringe, nice, exciting young guy. And instead of going with, there were, why am I blanking on who the option was? But there was another guy who was more of an established veteran and who had won more recently. And they said, no, like Scotty Scheffler's a dude. The other players, like, I trust him. And then by the end of that week, takes down John Rahm and sets the path for the next 2 years. And I think that's something the U.S. probably wouldn't have done 8 years ago.